This is lesson 8-11 and it's on dividing fractions. Our objective today is that you, the students, will be able to divide fractions by multiplying. And we're going to do something special today called multiplying by the reciprocal. And then at the end, simplifying. And a reciprocal is what's kind of known as an upside down fraction. So if you have a fraction, you rewrite it upside down to find its reciprocal. It's got a better definition than that, but if you could just think upside down or flipping it over, then you're going to be fine for this lesson. In order to succeed here, we're going to have to, number one, simplify fractions. That becomes a big thing in all of our lessons in Chapter 8. But anytime you have fractions, you have to write it in its simplest form. Number two, you have to be able to multiply fractions because, again, we're not dividing today. We're going to be multiplying or setting it up to where we can multiply. And then the key vocabulary here is reciprocal. Now, divisor and dividend come into it too because you have to know what's what, right? So if I have something like 3/4 divided by 1/2, which one is the divisor and which one is the dividend? Because we are going to be finding the reciprocal of the divisor. So the thing that you're dividing is here. That is called the dividend. What you're dividing by is here, and that is called the divisor. All right, so when we find the reciprocal, we're finding the reciprocal of the second fraction if you write it horizontally like that. Here's our notes for dividing fractions. What is the reciprocal of a fraction? That's a key concept in our lesson today. And then what are the steps to dividing fractions, or how do I divide fractions? Leave yourself plenty of space on the bottom to write some examples. All right, let's get into this idea of a reciprocal. All right, a reciprocal of a fraction is a fraction that's written upside down. So let's say we had a fraction like 3/5. All right, to write that upside down, the denominator you would write as the numerator, and the numerator you'd write as the denominator. So I make this little flippy symbol here, and then it becomes 5/3. And that's the reciprocal here. Okay, so anything flipped over becomes its reciprocal. And really the definition of a reciprocal is when you can multiply and equal 1. So if you find the reciprocal, you multiply by the fraction and it should equal 1. 3 times 5 is 15, and then 5 times 3 is 15, and it's the same numerator and the denominator, so that equals 1. So that right there, 5/3, is the reciprocal of 3/5. Now, we don't have to go through the whole proving process. Just know that when you flip over a fraction, you find its reciprocal. So let's take a look at a couple of other fractions. How about 4/5? What would the reciprocal be for 4/5? Well, it would be 5/4, because again, you just take the top number, write it on the bottom, bottom number, write it on the top, and rewrite it as its reciprocal. What about 5/8? In your head, you should be thinking the reciprocal of 5/8 is 8/5. What about the reciprocal of 1/4? The reciprocal of 1/4 would be 4/1. What about the reciprocal of 2, though? We have a whole number here, 2 and no fraction. Well, if you're going to be working with fractions, whenever you have a whole number, 2 equals 2/1. Right? Anytime you put 1 underneath your whole number, you can write it as a fraction. So then what's the reciprocal of 2/1? It would be 1/2. All right, what about the reciprocal of 12 then? And again, you rewrite 12 as 12/1, and then the reciprocal of 12/1 is 1/12. So we can find the reciprocal of whole numbers, we can find the reciprocal of fractions, and that's what we're going to need to do as we move through this lesson. Here's our example problems. We're going to be dividing fractions, and so rewriting the problem correctly, 3/7 divided by 1/2. And then right below it, you want to rewrite the dividend, which is 3/7. Now what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. All right, so instead of dividing, now we rewrite it as multiplication. And then instead of 1/2, we're going to flip that over, and it becomes 2/1. And at this point, it's a simple multiplication problem. 3 times 2 equals 6. 7 times 1 equals 7. Right? And there's our simplest form fraction because the numerator is just 1 less than the denominator. All right, let's move on to example B. Sometimes you're going to have whole numbers and going to be dividing by fractions. Sometimes you'll have fractions dividing by whole numbers. But anytime you have a whole number, you have to take one extra step, which is we're going to rewrite this one as a fraction. So right below it, I write 6/1 divided by 3/4. So now I've taken this original problem, rewritten it so that I have fractions. And now I'm going to rewrite it again as a multiplication problem. So the dividing sign becomes multiply, and now I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of the divisor. So that turns over into 4/3. And at that point, we're ready to solve this problem. 6 times 4 equals 24. 1 times 3 equals 3. 24 divided by 3 equals 8. Let's move into a couple guided practice problems. If you don't have your piece of graph paper, please get one out now. All right, so we're still dividing fractions. And again, we're multiplying by the reciprocal of the fractions. So guided practice number 1, we have 3/4 divided by 1/8. And then rewriting that as a multiplication problem. So the division sign becomes multiply. And the fraction 1/8, which is our divisor, flips over and becomes 8/1. And at this point, it's 3 times 8 equals 24. 4 times 1 equals 4. And then this one should be a mental math problem. 24 divided by 4 equals 6. All right, moving on now, we have a whole number divided by a fraction. And again, the whole number needs to be rewritten. So I'm going to write 12 divided by 2/3, rewrite the 12 as a fraction, so that's 12/1 divided by 2/3, and now rewriting it as a multiplication problem. So first step, make sure you have all fractions. Second step, it's a multiplication problem, but it's multiplying by the reciprocal of your divisor. So 2/3 becomes 3/2, and then it's a simple multiplication problem. 12 times 3 is 36. 1 times 2 is 2, and then 36 divided by 2. If you can't do that in your head, off to the side with you. 2 times 1. Bring down the next number, and it's 18. All right, they're not all going to end in whole numbers, but the first two certainly did. All right, here we have 1/3 divided by 12, and rewriting the problem so we have fraction pieces. Instead of 12, we have 12/1. And now, second step, multiplying by the divisor. So again, 1/12, or 12/1 becomes 1/12. And then 1 times 1 is 1, and 3 times 12 is 36. So 1/3 divided by 12 is 1/36. How do I know that's in its simplest form? The numerator is 1. All right, here we have 3/4 divided by 3/4, and most people know that if you divide anything by itself, the answer is going to be 1. But let's just prove it. Okay, so 3/4 divided by 3/4, and now rewriting it as a multiplication problem, 3/4 times 4/3, so multiplying by the reciprocal, and it becomes 12. 4 times 3 is 12, so it's 12/12, which equals 1. Proved. All right, here's our common mistake, and it's not knowing which fraction to flip over. So most people know that we're going to be doing a multiplication problem. So they start off with this, they say, okay, it's 2/5 divided by 1/8, and they don't know which one to turn over because this only works when you multiply by the reciprocal of the divisor. So we need to know the divisor. It's very hard to see that, but it becomes super important. You cannot flip this over. It does not work. All right, so 5, let's just see if it works. 5, and then that's 16. But the real way to do that would be 2/5 times 8/1, which is the reciprocal. And so it's 16/5. That's the answer after you simplify it. Not 5 over 16. So you cannot flip over the first number. It has to be the divisor that gets rewritten as a reciprocal. Here's our job today. We're going to be working out of the homework book H8-11. We're going to do all the problems 1 through 12. And remember, the second fraction is the divisor. So flip that one. Don't flip over the first one or your numbers will be all wrong. All right, good luck.